Hello, I'm Beth Joey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome. This is the channel where I paint my face, turn my camera on and talk about books. Now I am a little late to this because frankly, to be honest with you, I lost my camera charger and so I needed to buy a new one. So I haven't been able to film recently because of that. But today is going to be my January reading update. I read 13 books in January, which is just astronomical for me. I don't think I've ever read that many books in a month. But the problem with that is it is 13 books and that's going to take me ages to talk about. So I'm going to split this video into two parts. I found out when I was going through the books that I read in January that I read 7 romances alone. So my first part today is just going to be the romances that I read in January. My second part is going to be the 5 fantasy books and 1 thriller that I read. So I definitely can't be credited for my diverse reading habits this past month. Just to get a few quick stats out the way, as I said, I read 13 books this month, 7 romance, 5 fantasy, and 1 thriller. My average page count was 399 pages, which again just tends to be where I sit with my books, between 350 and 400 pages. As for the authors, 7 of these books were authors that I hadn't read before, and then 6 were repeat author reads. My average rating was 3.5 stars, which I've been finding has been going down lately because I'm becoming a bit more critical about the star ratings for my books rather than just basing it off of enjoyment. And I read a total of 5,191 pages, which is roughly 167 pages per day, which I'm pretty proud of myself for. That's a decent page count every day. As I said, this video is just going to be about the romances that I read in January. My next video will be the rest, and I'm going to start with a series that I started and finished in January, and that is the Brown Sisters Trilogy by Talia Hibbert. So Get a Life Chloe Brown, Take a Hint Dani Brown, and Act Your Age Eve Brown. As the name of the series suggests, it follows the Brown sisters as they navigate their romantic relationships with obviously 3 separate men, and then all of the sort of personal issues that have come into play in shaping who they are. For Chloe Brown, she's a chronically ill woman who has never really felt like she's taken the chance to live her life and try anything new and different. She feels like she's lived quite a closeted life, and after a near-death experience, she decides to recruit the help of her sort of bad boy neighbor, Redford Morgan, to complete a bucket list of tasks that she believes will help her to get a life. Next up, we have Dani Brown, the second sister, who is a professor at a university, and her love interest Zaf is the security guard outside of that building. Dani is definitely commitment averse. She is going through her life with friends with benefits rather than any real relationships, and then after a fire alarm, fireman Carrie, goes viral, she decides to start fake dating Zaf in the effort to seduce him because she believes that they were just meant to sleep together. And lastly, we have Eve Brown, who is a woman who I could only really describe as flighty. She's really struggled throughout her life to commit to anything, to find her passion and what she really wants to do. And so her parents decide that they're going to cut her off until she shows some real effort in maintaining a stable job. Eve doesn't receive this news very well, and so she goes for a drive just to a random town and sees a job advertisement for a chef, and she decides to apply. There she meets Jacob, the B&B owner, who is absolutely determined not to hire her. As she's leaving, she accidentally hits him with her car and sort of is a forced proximity kind of situation where she's kind of forced to help him and he's forced to hire her because he can't do any of the work himself anymore. There were 3 really lovely, really romantic, beautiful, funny books. I have to give Talia Hibbert so much credit because, as I've said before, she always makes her characters feel so authentic that they could just step off the page and be in your life and you'd never notice anything different. I will say to anyone who hasn't read this series and isn't a huge fan of romance, I would always still recommend reading the first book, Get a Life Chloe Brown, but I didn't like the second 2 as much, so sort of no need to read those, but they're still good. I rated Get a Life Chloe Brown 5 stars, and then these 2 follow-ups 4 stars each. There were just a couple of extra, more problematic things in them that I didn't truly appreciate. For example, in Take a Hint Dani Brown, Zaf and Dani seem to really enable each other's worst tendencies, and they brought out really bad sides of each other that I didn't love. And then in the final book, Act Your Age Eve Brown, I didn't love that Eve sort of self-diagnosed her own autism. I'm obviously never against someone figuring out some things about themselves and therefore going online and wanting to learn a bit more about it, but I really don't think that things like autism should be self-diagnosed, and she sort of decided one day after a quick Google that she had autism, and I had an issue with that. But all in all, these were 3 really lovely books. Next up, I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Talia Jenkins Reid, which I gave a whopping and well-deserved 5 stars. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is about the aging and reclusive Hollywood icon that was Evelyn Hugo. Following the end of her career, she's never really given any interviews until one day she chooses a journalist by the name of Monique Grant to write her life story. As you go through the book, Evelyn reveals everything that she did to get into the Hollywood movie industry in the 60s and how she used her body as a tool to really push her way into stardom, as well as her string of 7 husbands along the way and the forbidden love that she never really got to claim before but wants to be honest about now. As Monique gets to learn a bit more about Evelyn, she's constantly torn between loving and admiring her and hating her, especially when you get towards the end and you realize the unique and completely terrible and heartbreaking way that their lives actually intersect. This book was one of those books where I spent the entire time trying to figure out if Evelyn Hugo was inherently good or completely evil, and I don't think that that was the point of this book. I got to the end and went, I don't think she's supposed to be either. She's just a woman who did some bad things, who did some good things, who's just trying to tell her truth. And she was a woman who was facing the constant threat of prejudice and potentially criminal allegations against her because she is an LGBT woman in the 60s when I believe homosexuality was illegal. It was a really interesting book because when you think of a famous person, you think they have everything, but then when you really delve into their lives in this case, you begin to realize how trapped by themselves they are and how trapped by society's expectations of them and beauty standards, especially for women. So like I said, I gave this 5 stars. I thought it was fascinating. It's not a book that I'm going to forget about anytime soon. I absolutely loved it. Next up was another series, and I picked this up because of the hype and I completely understand it. And that was the Heartstopper Volume 1 and Volume 2 by Alice Oseman. I am planning to read Volume 3 and 4 in February. Volume 3 is actually on my February TBR. Check out Snakes and Ladders TBR if you haven't already. But yeah, I read the first 2 in January. I gave Volume 1 4 stars and Volume 2 5 stars. Heartstopper follows these 2 lovely boys as they go through high school and learn a bit about themselves and face the prejudice and the bullying that is just ever present in high school. Charlie is an openly gay boy at the school who faced some bullying when he originally came out, but that has sort of since passed, but the effects of it definitely haven't. He's still got the sort of mental health issues that tend to come from someone experiencing that level of bullying. So anxiety, depression, constantly second guessing himself, insecurities, all that sort of thing. And then we have Nick, who is your sort of typical manly man. He plays rugby, he's really tall and big and beefy, he's the popular kid in school. He's always thought of himself one way until he sort of starts this relationship and builds this friendship with Charlie, and he begins to question his own sexuality, begins to question everything that he thought he was and sort of struggle through that and the potential loss of some friendships that could come about as a result of him, you know, living his truth and coming out as who he is. And then the second book just really follows their relationship as it grows and flourishes as they come to terms with who they are individually and then who they are as a couple, and also the reactions to them that they are going to face from both Nick's friends, who are definitely confused about why Nick all of a sudden has come out and are reacting to that, and then also Charlie's friends who are worried about him because he's dating this popular guy in school and they think it might all be fake. So yeah, I gave these books 4 and 5 stars. I absolutely love them. They are such quick reads because they're graphic novels and the imagery in them is really, really beautiful. Like there's this moment where you see Charlie second guessing himself and the anxiety coming out, and the way that that's drawn in the book, it makes you feel the anxiety for him. And then lastly, we have Afterlove by Tanya Byrne, which was unfortunately one of my more disappointing books for the month. I was really, really excited about this frankly really beautiful sounding sapphic romance, but it just did not live up to my expectations. Afterlove follows Ash, who has recently gotten into a car accident and passed away. Because she was the last person to pass away seconds before the new year, Ash is sort of assigned to join this girl group of reapers who essentially go out, and as people die, they take them to this beach where they are then collected and put on a boat and, you know, go off to the afterlife or whatever they believe comes next. But right before she died, Ash met the love of her life, Poppy. In her afterlife, Ash can't forget Poppy. She can't forget how much she loved her. She's really struggling with the loss of her. And then one day, Poppy sees her, which isn't supposed to happen for these Reapers, and it's supposed to mean that Poppy's not that far away from death. The two of them are now determined to change the fate that they believe is Poppy is now destined to, and spend some more time together, even if it's only a couple more days. All of this sounds amazing, right? But I gave it 1 star. I had really high expectations, but at the end of the day, I just don't understand what the actual point of the story was, other than to just explore death and heartbreak from the perspective of the person who's just died. I thought the execution of the story was immature in quite a lot of ways, especially in that it felt like the author was just trying to make a point about the state of the LGBT movement in moments that it wasn't particularly relevant in the story, especially given the story wasn't about acceptance, it wasn't about the movement as a whole, it was more about these two girls trying to do everything they could to be together one last time. So there were a couple of scenes that just felt a bit cringy, they didn't make a lot of sense. It also really bothered me that Ash didn't really shed a tear for all the family and the friends that she left behind, everybody that she'd known for years and years and years. But when it came to Poppy, who she'd only known for about 6 months, she was literally willing to risk her life and put everything on the line so that Poppy wouldn't die, and that didn't make a lot of sense to me. And it felt really insta-love and really intense. So those are the 7 romances that I read in the month of January. Let me know your thoughts on any of the books that I've read, if you've loved them, if you've read them, if you hated any of them, or agree or disagree with any of my thoughts on them. As I said, there will be a second part to this video as I go through the rest of the books that I read in January, so do keep an eye out in the next couple of days for that one. I will see you in my next video. Bye!